These images conceal memories. Beneath Hollywood's familiar stories lies a hidden history of persecution and murder which haunted a small group of men, not American cowboys, but Jewish immigrants. This is the story of the founders of Hollywood, the story of the idea that became their America and ours.
What is America to me?
Modern America first saw light on a Hollywood screen. It was largely the product of 6 movie studios established in the 1920s and run for over 30 years by a group of Jewish immigrants. They had strikingly similar backgrounds.
All of these men who founded Hollywood were born within a 500-mile radius of one another. And all of them wound up roughly within 15 miles of one another in Los Angeles. One could say that the American dream was really born in Eastern Europe.
At the turn of the century, movies reflected the vision of America shared by Thomas Edison and the other men who invented the film industry. Most of these old stock Protestants saw film as an amusement for the working classes. Adolf Zucker believed that to attract the middle class, one had to change not just the theaters, but the films. Bypassing Edison, he imported from France this film, featuring a famous stage actress. He premiered it in a Broadway theater. Not wanting to depend on Europeans for quality films, Carl Laemmle and the other Jewish exhibitors began producing their own films. Edison decided that the Jews had overstepped their bounds. To shut them out in 1908, he organized a producers' trust that declared a monopoly on film production in America. 7 years later, Edison's trust would lose its monopoly in the courts. But in 1912, to escape Edison and the goons he sent to enforce his control of the industry, the future moguls headed west to the orange groves of California. Here they found immediate success.
Now, why did they move to California? I believe that they went there because California was a raw social environment. And although there was a social system in place, it was nowhere near as sophisticated and nowhere near as entrenched as the social hierarchy in Boston or New York or even Chicago, where these moguls came from. So coming to California, they realized that they could create their own social environment. They could create an empire of their own, not only on screen, but within their own lives and their own social environment. And that's precisely what they did.
Following Laemmle by 1920, Harry Cohen, Zucker, Goldwyn, Fox, and Mayer had set up their own studios, golden shtetls, where each was clearly in charge.
And these guys were ruthless. They used women. They treated stars brutally sometimes.
Why do I run it? Because I got horse sense, goddammit. Showmanship! And also, and I hope Lou told you this, I am bigger and meaner and louder than any other kike in this town. Did you tell him that, Lou? And I don't mean my dick is bigger than yours. It's not a sexual thing, although you're the writer. You know more about that. Coffee?
Jack Warner was considered a primitive, told terrible jokes.
From beginning to end, the executive had the primary input into the picture and supervised every aspect of production, over and above the fact that beyond any individual picture, it was the executive who created the entire studio apparatus. Every producer who worked there, every director who worked there, every writer who worked there, and every star who worked there was part of the larger system that was created by the Hollywood Jews.
I'm not sure that there was an, quote, American dream before the Jews came to Hollywood and invented it. What you had was a westward movement, and you had the idea of freedom, but you didn't have what we have today, which is a popular culture that creates dreams. That's a dream factory.
They created their own America, an America which is not the real America. It's their own version of the real America. But ultimately, this shadow America becomes so popular and so widely disseminated that its images and its values come to devour the real America. And so the grand irony of all of Hollywood is that Americans come to define themselves by the shadow America that was created by Eastern European Jewish immigrants who weren't admitted to the precincts of the real America.
In the 1920s and 30s, movie houses became temples of the new Hollywood religion. Jewish values made kitsch. 75% of all Americans went to the movies at least once a week.
This kind of movie-going was religious because it had to do with worship. It had to do with the screen being larger than you were, and you being in awe of what you were looking at, and feeling a certain reverence for it. And so there was, maybe you could say, a bogus spirituality, but it was a spirituality still that was believed in.
Actors became the gods and goddesses of the new American religion.
Innovation, getting cheerfully mobbed. It's frenzied friendship, frantic fandom. Here she comes, the star.
And where there are new gods, there must be new idols. So the studio heads began a movie guild with the lofty title of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. It was Mayer's brilliant idea to create the Oscars, where the movie moguls could honor themselves by giving each other awards. In this way, they went from being a group of immigrant Jews to award-winning American producers.
The whole notion that Hollywood pins itself on is intermarriage. The whole idea of inter-ethnic romance. Now, why do they do that? First of all, because love is a very democratic ideal. It knows no borders, it knows not riches, it knows not tradition, it knows simply the matters of the heart. In addition to that, when a Jew can marry a non-Jew, particularly part of the establishment culture, that's really a wonderful indication of how far up into society Jews have come.
The Hollywood Jews may have wanted to marry into white America, but when it came to music, Jewish composers looked to black America. Harold Arlen, the son of a liturgical singer or cantor, became one of the foremost popularizers of the blues.
Jews served as messengers, in essence, of black culture. They took it, they consumed it, they integrated it into their own cultural repertoire, and then introduced it to white America that was essentially willing to listen to Jews and to partake of what Jews had to offer in a way that they never would from blacks.
One of the things that made American films so exportable is that anyone, anywhere could identify with so many of the themes of American movies, one of which was the idea of the outsider, which was a Jewish theme. Jews being outsiders, making films about outsiders. You see this even in monster pictures. I mean, King Kong. There's a film about, an outsider. And yet, it's the monster, if you want to call King Kong that, with whom the audience sympathizes.
Carl Laemmle was an outsider. He resembled an elf. Not surprisingly, Universal's films often championed marginal beings who were persecuted like the Jews of Europe.